I hadn't even crossed the room yet, and they'd already branded me. There it was, waiting for me at the check-in table near the marble staircase, a polished silver place card, etched in elegant serif font, like it belonged to some gala dinner. Only it wasn't my name that made my chest tighten. Ethan, the failure subtle, clean, brutal. I stared at it for longer than I'd like to admit. The concierge gave me a stiff smile, like I hadn't just been stabbed with a ballpoint pen. I didn't pick it up. I didn't rip it. I didn't even blink, just walked past it like it was a misprint. But my gut twisted all the same. I heard the laugh before I saw him. Low, smug, familiar. Gerald. Always just on the right side of plausible deniability. Technically, my stepfather. Spiritually, my lifelong antagonist. He was at the bar, swirling red wine like a villain in a soap opera, already laughing with a small group of sycophants. He looked my way, met my eyes, and winked. It wasn't just him. There was Margaret, my mother, glowing in her red shawl, center of attention as always. Flanked by her real masterpieces, Oliver, the big firm attorney with the trust fund jawline, and Helena, the med school darling who never lifted a dish in her life. They were laughing, toasting, shining under the soft lighting of the private lounge like they'd stepped out of a family magazine cover shoot. And me? I was background noise. Uninvited, technically. Barely tolerated, realistically. Still, I took a glass of champagne from a passing server, even if my hand trembled around the stem. The chill of the drink did nothing to calm the thudding in my chest. I sipped anyway, swallowed hard, breathed slower than I wanted to. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" The voice was syrupy, almost amused. I turned. Gerald again. He wore that same wolf in a cashmere suit expression. Didn't wait for me to respond. "I figured you'd be too busy. Doing your little startup thing," he said, smiling like it was adorable I tried to build something for myself. I offered a non-committal nod, still doing it. "Uh-huh," he said, then leaned in just slightly. "Loved your name card, by the way. Very fitting." There it was. The knife twisted. And me? I didn't flinch. Not anymore. "Tell me," I asked coolly, "did you engrave it yourself or outsource, like you usually do?" He blinked, caught off guard. Before he could spit out another passive-aggressive gem, I turned and walked away. I wasn't here to win their approval. I wasn't here for forgiveness or false family nostalgia. I was here because I needed to see it for myself, how far gone this place really was. I thought I had been prepared, but seeing it up close, the way they paraded around as if I were invisible, as if I hadn't clawed my way through every obstacle they stacked against me, it burned deeper than I expected. The flashbacks came like clockwork. Cold nights sleeping on a mattress in a shared apartment. Nights I worked 3 jobs while Oliver flew to Spain for sabbatical soul searching. The day I opened my bank account expecting my late dad's college fund and found it empty because Margaret had reallocated it to help Helena with early admission expenses. I took another sip. I wasn't here for closure. I was here to remind myself why I'd left. And maybe, just maybe, to finish what they started. There was a time, and I hate admitting this, when I still believed I could win them over. That if I worked hard enough, played polite enough, became sharp and presentable enough, my mother might finally look at me with something resembling pride. That maybe Gerald would stop calling my dreams passion projects and start using words like ambition. That Oliver and Helena would quit pretending I was some inconvenient extra. But looking around that country club ballroom tonight, the memory of that hope feels laughable. Because the truth is, they never wanted me to succeed. At least not if I did it my way. When I was little, Margaret used to call me her little builder. I'd spend hours stacking blocks, sketching floor plans on napkins, tinkering with anything mechanical. My dad, Daniel, encouraged it. Sat next to me for hours, cheering me on as I built cardboard cities taller than I was. He believed in me, but when he passed, the belief died with him. Margaret remarried within a year. Gerald moved in, bringing his designer suits, his portfolio of condo developments, and his perfectly symmetrical kids. Overnight, it felt like the air in our house changed, colder, heavier. Suddenly, I was just Daniel's son, an echo from a life she wanted to forget. It started subtly. A missed science fair, a late arrival at my school play. Then came the casual cuts. "Ethan, maybe skip architecture? It's too unstable. Your brother just got a law internship. Maybe shadow him. You need to be more realistic, sweetheart." Realistic. That was their favorite word. What they really meant was compliant. I learned quickly that Oliver and Helena had the script memorized. They followed the path, prep school, private coaches, Ivy-bound majors, LinkedIn, ready smiles. They didn't make waves. They made dinner reservations. I, on the other hand, made the mistake of dreaming out loud. I got good grades, applied to design programs. I was accepted. But when I went to access the savings my dad left me, it was gone, drained. I still remember that conversation like it was etched into my bones. It went to Helena's tuition, Margaret said casually, as if we were discussing groceries. She needed the early acceptance boost, Gerald added. You're talented, she insisted. You'll figure it out. They didn't see it as theft. They saw it as reallocation, as if my future was a scrap pile they could mine to build someone else's dream. I left that night, took my backpack, my half-filled portfolio, and a bus to the city. No goodbye, no rage. Just survival. I worked construction during the day, took classes at night, ate instant ramen, and designed coffee shops on bar napkins. I taught myself code, learned business, registered my LLC in a public library between shifts, while Oliver flew to corporate retreats and Helena Instagrammed hospital rotations. I was building my studio with blistered palms and maxed out Wi-Fi, and yet, somehow, I became the disappointment. Because I didn't show up to Easter brunches. Because I stopped replying to invitations scrawled with faux warmth. Because I didn't want a seat at a table where I was the punchline. But they still needed me to show up sometimes, for appearances, to prove Margaret was a good mother, that Gerald supported all his kids, that I was just a late bloomer, not estranged. And tonight, they wanted me to smile while they handed me a name tag that said, The Failure. Not out loud, of course. They didn't scream their disdain. They printed it, etched it on silver, polished it with pride. I stared at the glass in my hand, watching condensation drip down the stem, not from nerves, from clarity. They'd erased me once, but I was done letting them do it again. This wasn't just a birthday party. This was the last performance I'd ever attend. And if they expected me to stay silent, stand in the corner, sip champagne, and nod while they clinked glasses over my grave, they had no idea who I'd become. The deeper I moved into the room, the more invisible I became. They knew I was there, of course they did, but no one approached me. No warm greetings. No fake hugs. No attempts to pretend. This was one happy family. It was as if I were just another shadow clinging to the edge of the chandelier light. I passed a long banquet table filled with hors d'oeuvres that looked too symmetrical to eat. A server offered me another glass. I waved it off. My fingers were still cold from the first. At the far end of the room, Margaret was standing near the fire pit terrace, laughing with a few sharply dressed men I assumed were donors or city commissioners. She had that voice, gentle but authoritative, the kind that made people want to give her money or favors. My mother had always been impressive that way. She could charm a crowd, command a room, spin a narrative in real time. She just never used any of that skill on me. Oliver stood beside her in a tailored navy suit, tossing out punchlines and flashing his watch every time he raised a drink. To their left, Helena against a column, taking selfies with a group of her college friends. They all looked effortless, expensive, untouched by the kind of labor I'd built my life on. I didn't envy them. I just resented how easily the world said yes to people like them. Dad was so generous to pay for my wedding, Oliver said with a chuckle. But of course, that's what you do for the successful ones, right? He always prioritized the ones with potential, Helena added. And they clinked glasses, their smirks as polished as their shoes. And that was it, the final click. It wasn't the name card. It wasn't Gerald's smirk. It wasn't Margaret's endless ignoring. It was that moment when they proudly confirmed what I'd known my whole life, that I was never truly one of them, just a necessary ghost for their narrative. A contrast to make themselves look shinier. I didn't plan what happened next. I didn't rehearse it. There was no cinematic swell of music or inner monologue, just instinct. I stepped toward the center of the room, slowly, past the hors d'oeuvres, past the rows of chairs, walked until I was standing directly beside the grand piano. I picked up a knife and gently tapped it against my empty glass. Clink, clink. The sound was sharp, clean. It echoed. The room dimmed to a hush. Conversations thinned. Heads turned. Eyes squinted through the low gold light to place me, and then widened once they did. Margaret blinked. Gerald straightened. Oliver chuckled. Oh God, what's this about? Helena tilted her head, confused. I smiled. Steady, calm, ready. I just wanted to raise a quick toast, I said, lifting my empty glass. To thank you all for reminding me exactly who I am. There was a beat of confusion. Tonight's been enlightening, I continued. From the moment I walked in and saw my nameplate, I felt nothing but embraced. A few heads turned toward the check-in table. Some of the guests chuckled, unsure if this was a roast or something more serious. To Gerald, I said, turning toward him, for making sure I never forget what category I fall under, the failure. A subtle choice, but powerful. His expression twitched. Not anger, just calculation. He was weighing how public this would get. To Margaret, I continued, lifting my glass slightly higher. You taught me that blood is only thicker than water when it's convenient. That silence can be louder than hate. That love has conditions, usually written in fine print. Now people were murmuring. Someone actually whispered, "Oh wow." Margaret didn't move, didn't blink, just watched me, eyes sharp and narrowed, lips pressed into a line that used to quiet boardrooms. And to Oliver and Helena, I finished, turning to face them directly, you were never my siblings. You were the golden children. The proof that this family only values obedience, polish, and PR-friendly success. I wasn't a disappointment. I just refused to pretend. Oliver's face had lost its humor. Helena looked down at her phone, like maybe this wasn't happening. I looked around at the room full of guests, some strangers, some old family friends, some people I hadn't seen in over a decade. Their expressions were everything from shocked to fascinated. And I wasn't done. I spent years wondering what I did wrong. I said voice quieter now, but no less certain. But I get it now. I never failed. I just didn't fit. I set the glass down slowly on the piano lid. So thank you, I said again, turning back to them, because this will be the last time any of you see me at one of these events. Dead silence. Even the music in the background seemed to pause, like the playlist itself wasn't sure what to do. Margaret opened her mouth, maybe to speak, maybe to salvage it. Gerald stepped forward like he was about to intervene. I turned and walked out before either could speak. And this time, no one followed me. No one dared. I didn't drive off right away. I sat in the parking lot of that country club, my hands still gripping the steering wheel like I was holding onto something heavier than a car. The lights inside were still glowing, blurred through the windshield. Somewhere in there, people were talking about me, no doubt, scrambling to reframe what had just happened. Let them. I wasn't sorry. Not for the speech, not for the nameplate, not for finally putting words to what I'd felt for 2 decades. I'd always imagined it would feel chaotic, yelling, screaming, someone dragging me out by the elbow. But it was quiet, controlled. My words had landed like cold steel in a velvet room. And that was more powerful than any scene I could have thrown. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, then again and again. And I need to look to know who it was. I finally unlocked it 20 minutes later when I was parked outside my apartment. Gerald, you just embarrassed your mother in front of her entire network. Oliver, what the hell, man? You don't air dirty laundry like that. Margaret, call me. Now. Helena didn't message. She never had much to say unless it came with a compliment sandwich or an apology she didn't mean. There was one more message from an unknown number. Daniel would be proud of you. I just wanted you to know that Uncle Ben, that one stayed on the screen for a while. I didn't reply to any of them that night. I turned my phone off, dropped it on the kitchen counter, and spent the next hour sitting on the floor with a blanket over my shoulders and an untouched glass of water on the table beside me. I should have been buzzing with adrenaline, but I wasn't. I was calm. Still, it felt like the first breath after being underwater for years. The next morning, I woke up to silence, no family drama group chats, no new passive-aggressive invites to brunches I'd never attend, no last-minute requests for help with resumes, cover letters, portfolio reviews. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into my business inbox, and dove into my actual life, the one I built, the one they always pretended didn't matter. By the time I had my second cup of coffee, I'd already closed 2 new clients and scheduled a contractor meeting. The world hadn't ended. It had gotten quieter, lighter. Even my studio felt different, brighter. Like now that I wasn't dragging their approval behind me like a weight, I could finally walk upright. I blocked Gerald's number that afternoon. Margaret's too. I didn't write a farewell speech or send a dramatic text. I just cut the cord. It wasn't anger, it was necessity. You don't leave the fire because you hate it. You leave because it burns you every time. On the third day, I got a knock on my apartment door. I peered through the peephole. Margaret, alone, hairpinned, lipstick perfect, her expression unreadable. I almost didn't open the door. Part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home, to let her stew in her own silence. But another part, the one that had once waited at the top of the stairs as a kid, hoping she'd come tuck me in, that part cracked the door open. "Ethan," she said, like we were meeting for the first time. I opened it wider, but didn't move to let her in. She took the hint and stayed in the hallway. I came to talk. About the party? No, she said. About everything. I folded my arms. You've had years. Her jaw tensed, but she didn't push back. You embarrassed us, she said instead. But you made your point. I raised an eyebrow. Which one? She ignored the jab. I just want to understand. Why now? You don't understand? I said, incredulous. After the nameplate stunt? After decades of being the invisible son? She didn't flinch. That same politician composure, I didn't put the nameplate there, she said. Gerald did. And you didn't stop him. Silence. I saw it, she admitted. Thought it was cruel. But I didn't want to create a scene. So you let me walk into it. Her eyes dropped for the first time. You weren't supposed to be there, she said softly. We assumed you wouldn't come, and you still felt the need to mock me. More silence. Then, Gerald always said tough love was necessary. I laughed. A short, joyless sound. That wasn't love. She looked away. I didn't come here to fight, she said. I just wanted you to know. I heard you. I stared at her, and she hesitated. And I don't know how to fix it. I sighed, stepping back just slightly. You can't, I said, because it's not broken. It's gone. Margaret blinked. But again, no denial, no reaching for an apology. She wasn't here to grovel. She was here to control the narrative. Still, I hope you're okay, she said at last. I am. A pause. Well, happy birthday, she added awkwardly, realizing maybe for the first time what week it was. I raised an eyebrow. She turned and walked away. No hug, no I love you. Just heels on tile and the quiet click of an elevator closing. That night, I turned off my phone again, sat on my balcony, looked out at the city. It sparkled, not in the polished way Gerald's house did, but in the messy, beautiful chaos of life happening. I was no longer waiting for their approval. I was no longer angry. I wasn't anything to them anymore. And, for once, that felt like enough. It took 4 days for everything to go quiet. No more calls, no more texts, no more knocks at the door. Gerald didn't reach out. Of course not. He wasn't the type to apologize. He was the type to sulk in silent control, to pretend my absence was strategic, temporary, a phase I'd crawl back from. Margaret didn't come back either, not even a voicemail. She delivered her message, calm, rehearsed, performative, and walked away, content that she'd said just enough to soothe her conscience. They'd written me off. Finally, the silence that followed didn't sting. It healed. The next week, I got a package. No return address. I peeled back the paper, cautious. Inside was a small black velvet box. No note, no explanation. I opened it and exhaled sharply. It was my father's old compass, the brass one with the cracked dial and initials engraved on the back, DM, Daniel Morgan. I remembered playing with it as a kid, watching the arrow spin even when it didn't know where to point. It used to sit on his desk, beside the stack of engineering blueprints I was never supposed to touch, but always did. After he died, it vanished. I assumed Margaret had tossed it or buried it somewhere in her new life, alongside everything else that reminded her of him. But now, here it was. I turned it over slowly. There was one more engraving I hadn't noticed before. For the son who finds his own way. I sat there for a while, just holding it. My throat tightened, but no tears came. I wasn't mourning. I was remembering. There's a difference. My father had seen something in me long before I learned to protect it. And even if Margaret and Gerald tried to erase that version of me, they couldn't touch what he left behind. That Sunday, I drove out of the city. No destination. Just a full tank, a playlist I hadn't touched in years, and an ache in my chest that needed to stretch across some horizon. I passed old towns I'd lived in briefly, driveways I once parked in, waiting for rent checks to clear. Parks where I used to sketch in the cold because I couldn't afford heating and inspiration at the same time. It wasn't nostalgia, it was accountability. I needed to remember how far I'd come, not to impress anyone, but to remind myself that I did it alone. The version of me they laughed at, mocked, labeled a failure, that version built the life I live now. He deserves better than silence. He deserves to stand tall. All. 2 weeks after the party, I got one last message, this time from Oliver. He hadn't said a word since the night I called him out publicly. Not a text, not a passive-aggressive social media post. But now, out of nowhere, he broke the code. I didn't know Gerald did that with the nameplate. That was disgusting. Just wanted to say I see it now. What they did, what I did. Hope you're doing all right. No excuses, no backpedaling. Just recognition. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, I wasn't, but because I didn't need to keep that door cracked open anymore. Forgiveness isn't always about conversation. Sometimes it's about deciding not to carry the weight with you. And I was traveling light these days. I've never told this story publicly, not in full. Most people in my life know bits and pieces, that I built my business from scratch, that I'm estranged from my family, that I walked away from something toxic, but they don't know about the nameplate, or the speech, or the night I finally chose peace over proximity. Sometimes people ask if I regret it. What if they changed? What if they're sorry now? But the truth is, it doesn't matter anymore. Because I didn't walk away expecting transformation. I walked away knowing I was finally free. There's a myth we're sold that family always comes first. That blood is a currency we're forever indebted to, but love isn't ownership and family isn't entitlement. You don't owe loyalty to people who broke you just because they share your name. What I owed was to the boy I used to be, the one who waited at windows, who wanted to be seen, who thought maybe if he worked hard enough, he'd earn a seat at a table never meant for him. That boy, he built a table of his own. And now, he doesn't need to prove anything. Not to them. Not anymore.